Next Curve.
Hey everyone, this is Leonard Lee, Executive Analyst at Next Curve, and welcome to this episode of the Rethink Podcast, live here from the Palace Hotel in San Francisco, and I'm here for RSAC 2025, which is like, I think, the premier cybersecurity conference in all of the Telemundo or the El Mundo, right? And I'm here with a very good friend of mine, Jo Peterson of Clarified 360. And you know what? It's really amazing to have you on and to be here with you in San Francisco for this event. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. Guys, you can't see this place, this Palace Hotel, but it is gorgeous. It's like this architectural turn of the 19th or 20th century situation with these gorgeous domed glass ceilings. If you can check it out ever, come check it out.
Yeah, actually, we're going to go off script here a little bit, and we're going to show you for a moment, okay?
Yeah.
Wow, look at this. Look at that.
Know.
Wow, that's what she's talking about, right? And then look at the chandeliers. Yeah, it's quite amazing, right? Wow, hopefully no one got dizzy with that. But hey, before we get started, remember to like, share, comment on this episode. Also subscribe to Next Curve Rethink Podcast on Buzzsprout as well as on YouTube. And also, just before we start, a disclaimer, all the views and comments by my guests are entirely their own and don't reflect those of Next Curve or myself, and we do this because we want to keep an open forum, allow my guests to, say their piece and foster an open conversation around technology and some of the leading trends that matter, especially in this really important industry called cybersecurity, which looks like it's getting really, really hot this year, right? I mean, it's a hot topic. And we have a lot of stuff going on, AI, SaaS apparently, which we'll talk about in a moment. But before we get started, everybody wants to know, Jo, what do you think? What have been some of your key takeaways from the event so far and the engagements that you've had with vendors and end users, practitioners, etc.?
Yeah, so the event has been really well attended. I, heard that there are about 30,000 people here at RSA. Don't know yet,
44.
But 44. Oh man. Okay. All right. Much bigger than I thought.
Yeah.
The thing with RSA is, if you've ever visited, we were chatting about this a little bit earlier. Everything used to happen just at Moscone, in the buildings around Moscone. And what's happened over the last few years, I'd say since post-COVID, things have become even more decentralized. So maybe you don't see all the people all in one place, all at one time, kind of a thing, because they're here and there at the different buildings that surround, let's say, the 10 blocks around Moscone, right? So, but great activity here. I think that last year was AI training wheels at RSA. AI training wheels at RSA. We weren't seeing the plethora of use cases yet. We weren't seeing, some of it in the field and in practice. And now we are. We're seeing generative AI being put in place. I don't know. Depends on who you ask and what resource you look at, right? But generative AI is something that it's being used across enterprise. Now, the next trend is Agentic AI.
Yeah.
Right? So we're hearing lots of conversations about how to protect Agentic AI, because Agentic AI brings on its own set of challenges and complexity that we didn't see in generative AI. So that's been a big conversation that's happening here.
Yeah, really big conversation. And then, with cybersecurity, there's always a light side and a dark side, right? It's like watching Star Wars. There's the dark side of the Force and the light side of the Force. And one of the things that I heard quite often, actually, ever since I stepped on the floor of the Moscone was shadow AI. So the growing challenge and problems with shadow AI. And we're going to talk about something a little bit similar to that regarding SaaS, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I know that you wanted to talk about this study that was published by the Cloud Security Alliance. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about that, and then maybe we can just talk about that and what sort of bearing it has in the cybersecurity conversation going into this year, because obviously, the timing was interesting, right, to say the least. So
right. I mean, I think that the findings were very interesting. Maybe not, maybe sort of expected. Some of the findings were sort of expected.
But tell us a little bit about the study first, though.
Yeah, so the Cloud Security Alliance, and I'm going to check my notes here, and so you'll see me looking down in a minute here, because I don't want to get stuff wrong. Right, it is a big study. They published the State of SaaS Security Report 2025 on April 21st. So I think they wanted it to be a little bit of a topic of conversation here at RSA, right? I think they wanted folks to sort of, like us, to sort of talk about it and bubble it up, because they spent a long time getting it ready. If you look at SaaS, it makes up a significant portion of IT budgets.
Right.
The latest findings from Gartner is that it represents 41% of total public cloud investment in 2025, right? And that's a shift for many organizations, especially those, like when we were coming up, that were highly infrastructure based, physical equipment, infrastructure based, that had life cycles, investment cycles. It was a capital expense. It was a 3 to 5 year window. And that's changed. More and more of the IT budgets are moving towards SaaS of some sort. And if you think about that in a lot of different ways, first of all, your browser is your new edge. Think about that, right?
And very light. It's
your new
not
edge.
quite zero footprint, but yeah, you're right.
It's forget the old topologies of hub and spoke. Those are gone. And think about, and then everybody, we all went remote work during the pandemic. So that edge worker became, but now as we move towards more and more SaaS in our budgets, now the browser has become the edge. Right? So if you think about that, and so if you think about some of the work that came out of this study around spending, cloud spending in 2025 represented the large, and SaaS in the cloud market represented $300 billion. Like that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of dinero.
Right?
I agree.
And SaaS is becoming the preferred method of purchasing software. And deploying software. And you've got these shifting patterns that are occurring. It's not just IT that is buying this anymore. It's other business units that are buying it. So I think that there's some patterns that are emerging, and I think that there were some goals of the study that came out as well.
And I think the SaaS trend actually has been in play for quite some time. I think, going back to my prior comment about the AI, shadow AI, right? We had the problem with shadow IT, and in a way, SaaS became part of that dynamic. And so actually what I thought was really interesting about the paper is actually speaking to something that we'll probably be concerned about next year, which is shadow AI,
for sure,
which will take its form in a number of different ways, not just from there'll be an infrastructure aspect of it, because there's now a lot of, let's say, GPU as a service type players out there. Anyone, like a department, can just go out and provision their own instances of MVL 72, like a GB 300 MVL 72. That's an NVIDIA big supercomputing thing, if you don't know what that is. So, from there all the way up, right? Because you have the AI platforms, and then now you have these folks that are creating all these chatbots and applications. And so I think what we saw with the cloud and are continuing to see with the cloud is probably going to translate, or it's just going to morph or extend further out as we and have like sort of this agentic AI layer maybe in next year, because that, I mean, it's all kind of interrelated, right?
Right. So one of the things to think about, and we did learn lessons from the cloud, right? When I started architecting cloud environments in 2009, security was an afterthought.
Yeah.
Security was bolted on at the end of the process, and now we think about designing those environments with security at the forefront.
Yeah.
The thing that's different, there's a number of things that are different about AI. So, Agentic AI, first of all, is not your dad's minivan of an LLM. It is not. It is smarter. It makes decisions on its own, and it thinks without human intervention, which can be good or it could be bad. Now, let's extrapolate with that a minute. What we learned about during cloud was identity management. That was one of the lessons we learned from cloud. Remember math in school where we would put an exponent on something and it would generally just make it bigger? That's what's happening with AI. If you think of it in that terms, that exponent level, because you're not just worried about human identities anymore, you're worried about machine identities.
Yes.
So that becomes a different thing, managing those identities, managing the life cycle of those identities. That's another problem.
Yeah.
And, if you start to think about that, and you start to think about that as an emerging threat vector, that becomes its own set of problems. Yeah. And do we have the tools today to manage that? Well, we're getting there, but it's changing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's changing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you brought up the management of identities, especially non-human identities. Mm-hmm. I was just in a session. There was a gentleman from Exabeam. That's the name of the company. And he was talking about, he wasn't from Exabeam. He was from some other company. Anyways, his point was 40% of the identities within most organizations or average organization is non-human.
Right.
And a lot of these get accumulated. They're not life cycle managed. It's difficult to life cycle manage. It's hard to trace, okay, what sort of application dependencies do these identities have? If you just erase or delete that identity, will it impact an integrated system? So yeah, it's a growing problem, but then now you stick agentic stuff on top of it, right? This notion that there are going to be billions of agents out there, or maybe for an enterprise organization might have thousands of these things. How do you manage those identities? How do you manage those non-human identities that are going to interface with now other human identities? And so there's a whole can of worms that are being opened up, and there really isn't an answer right now. Nope. Because I think the question about how do we manage all this agentic stuff is going to be increasing area of focus and exploration. And I emphasize exploration because no one's actually come up with a solid solution or a standard for doing this stuff. But going back to SaaS, I think this is just going to complicate things more in terms of the need to focus on SaaS security. Because I know one of the things that you had brought up in a conversation we had before was the need to secure APIs, right? And these software SaaS offerings are becoming more agentic, right? You have Salesforce, you have ServiceNow, both who are famously in the forefront, if you will, of this quote-unquote agentic AI movement. So, what are your thoughts?
No, totally. I think that, there's this popular app. I saw a commercial for it and I thought it was really cool, and then it got me thinking about, and maybe there's stuff out there like this, and maybe the big companies have access to it, but the tool is called Rocket Money. And basically it finds all the subscriptions on your phone that you have, right? And I'm like, wow, that'd be really cool if we had that for organizations, because I can't tell you how many times I go in and I'm like, oh, show me all your apps, and they're like, well, okay, here's what we got, and then we do a little fiddling around and we find out, oh, you got a lot more than that, right? And my point that I'm trying to make is accounting for SaaS inventory is tough. Visibility into that SaaS inventory, do you know what your organization owns?
Yeah.
If you don't know what your organization owns, my question to you is this: how are you going to secure it?
Right. No. What's the security posture, exposure of those assets? I think that's in applications. Right. I mean, it's like the full stack. Do you have visibility? And that's another thing that from last year was a big deal, especially with the advent of large language models and everyone trying to make the push toward enterprise AI, is how do we deal with the securing of these models in their various forms of deployment in a way that's scalable. And that all starts with understanding, okay, here's our portfolio today. Do we know what our security posture is for every single asset, for every single, I mean, down to data or even keywords? It's like insane, right?
Nope.
And so when you look at what the path to readiness, right, safe and responsible and reliable AI for your enterprise look like, the path to readiness is actually very complex, and it's fraught with risks. And these are things that CISOs as well as CIOs and vendors need to be conscious of, because I think the industry is still on the back foot. They're still trying to figure stuff out, but it's pretty evident when you look at what constitutes, let's say, even just one reliable, what you might call enterprise class AI application. The requirements are very, very high.
Right.
Right,
they are. And, so a couple things, and maybe people realize this and maybe they don't. And this is a shout out to all my CISOs, because I'm always sitting in the CISO corner, trying to help you out here.
Yeah.
Boards, give your CISOs more money. That's the front end of the message. People don't realize that the average organization, depending upon the vertical, now the highly regulated verticals spend more, but the average company spends between 5 and 12% of their IT budget on security. That's small if you think about it, right? And when you think about particularly the highly regulated ones that have so much to make sure that they're in compliance with and ready for to keep the business moving forward and going. So boards, give your CISOs more money. Because
less pressure.
Less pressure. Because
that's the other thing we hear about a lot, board pressure.
Yeah, right. But security is no longer one of those things that's an afterthought. It is integral to your business. It's integral to your business's reputation.
Yes.
All kinds of things. Consumers are so much more aware today than they were 5 or even 10, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So consumers, I think, care what you're doing with their data. They care how secure you are. They care about those things.
Yeah, and because it's all about trust. And I'm going to tell you a really quick story. This morning I got an email. It's a phishing email. It turns out it was a phishing email, and it was the most authentic looking phishing email with a contract. And I'm not going to name the name of the company that it referenced, because I want to, I don't want to. Bottom line is this:
happen to anybody.
A lawyer had her email account hacked, and yes, and then the hacker basically broadcasted thousands of emails using her email account and basically soliciting payment, in a phishing attack. And her office received because it was so legitimate looking,
Yeah.
I actually almost clicked on it.
Oh.
That's how good it was.
Oh.
I mean, me almost clicked on it. That office that morning received thousands of phone calls. So that I felt so bad for the receptionist. I told her, you know what, I'm going to get off the phone right now so that you can handle the other calls. And she said, thank you.
Yeah.
And I empathize with her, but think about that. I mean, I call that a physical DDoS attack. I mean, you are flooding that office.
You're not
with
wrong.
a bunch of calls.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, and then bogging that business down. I mean, that's like real impact that can be completely disruptive to your business, and also the reputation. You gotta wonder, you know, well, how trustworthy are their IT systems? You know?
Yeah,
Law firm.
and it can happen to anybody.
Yeah,
That's
it can
the
happen
thing.
to anybody.
You know, that these bad guys, with the help of AI, are not going to your endpoints anymore because the endpoints are locked down, right? Companies have done a good job. So they're doing things like voice phishing, or they're doing things about like getting into systems, you know, and then moving laterally that are not traditional endpoints, which we've all tried to do a good job and lock down. So it's happening. And you know, the thing with AI is we're just going to have to move faster than the bad guys do, or hope that we move faster than the bad guys do. But this SaaS report was very eye-opening and very interesting for a lot of reasons, because to me, it went beyond security, and it really talked about what was happening in the landscape, who was buying, you know, what the problems were, like visibility, what the problems were with inventory, what the problems were with machine identities. It talked about a lot of the things that are, to me, very tangential to not just SaaS, but to, you know, the AI challenges that we're going to see coming up.
Yeah, and the other key word, oversharing. The problem with oversharing that's inherent with shadow anything that's related to IT or AI or any of these information related technologies. And so the industry has its work cut out for it. And, you know, I think there has to be a fine balance between best practices and hygienic practices on the side of the enterprise, and then for the vendors to be able to bring responsible AI, you know, thoughtfully designed AI that's actually going to help address the problems rather than create new threat vectors for their customers. And I think those are things that, you know, we as analysts need to help the industry on both sides, right? The end user side and the vendor side to bring those capabilities. Because, you know, one of the scariest slides that keeps getting put up there is how quickly the cyber criminal economy is growing. It's at $10 billion a year. It's the third largest economy in the world, growing at the fastest rate. And I think that's an underestimation, because I don't know where they come up with these numbers, you know. They might just, you know, we know the GDP of the US and, you know, the China and the EU, but how do they figure out the size of the cyber criminal economy? I don't know, but it's undoubtedly very large and apparently growing very, very fast. So
and part of it is just the ease of acquisition. You know, back in the day, a script kiddie used to have to at least know how to code. A script kiddie does not need to know how to code today. They can just buy a prepackaged anything, phishing software, whatever it is they want, and just go for it. Template, done. So with that,
are we done?
I don't know, maybe.
Oh my gosh, it's so wonderful to have you on. We got to do this again.
I love
maybe
that.
We should start a podcast around cloud and security, and it'll just be you and me.
All right, that'd be fun.
Sound good?
That'd be fun.
All right, well, wonderful having you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much for your hospitality and inviting me here. I haven't been here before. It's
gorgeous, right? It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and so for those of you who tuned in and made it this far, thank you. Hope you found the podcast entertaining and informative. And all of you should follow Jo. She's wonderful. She is She's my mentor.
Oh man,
that?
that's a lot of weight. That is a lot of weight. Well, thank you for having me on the
Oh,
show.
absolutely. And why don't you tell our audience how they can get in touch with you, a little bit about your firm, and then maybe the kind of research that you focus on, so they can give you a call.
Oh, that'd be great. So, as Leonard said, I'm Jo Peterson. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always posting on LinkedIn. There's some crazy cat videos that I post with when I try to tell a cybersecurity or AI security story. I'm easily amused, so I hope you find them amusing too. I'm on Twitter at love cats, right?
Yeah.
I'm on Twitter at Clear Tech Research, and I'm an engineer by trade, and so what I bring to the table is I bring that end user's point of view when they're looking at technology. My areas of focus are cloud security, and AI security.
Yeah, see? Yeah, she is one of those folks that you need to follow. So, yes, remember to like, share, and subscribe to Next Curve Research Portal at www.next-curve.com for the tech and industry insights that matter. Live here from RSAC 2025. We'll see you next time.